Welcome to the 1 Million Years of Joy podcast. I'm Dr. Andrea Benaker, your host, and my intention is to inspire you to find more joy in your life through the stories from our guests and the science on joy and purpose. Dr. Patricia Moore, welcome. It's such a pleasure to have you with us today.
It's my honor and delight.
Dr. Moore, you are an internationally renowned gerontologist and designer. And I was curious if you could share with our audience your journey into this field and why were you interested by these two distinct disciplines?
Oh, I wasn't at all. When I was 17, I was packing up for university. I lived in Buffalo, New York, on the border with Canada. And I went to Rochester, New York, just an hour's drive away, very deliberately, the only university I applied to. And I look at young people today who applied to dozens and they're so worried. And I remember having no worries whatsoever. I just thought I'll be accepted here and I'm going to study medical illustration so that I could have a day job, pay my bills, because I'm very pragmatic. And then in the evenings, I would be a fine artist and on weekends too. And eventually I would not have to be a medical illustrator and I would just be an artist. And so design and gerontology were not on my radar at all when I was a teenager. In my freshman year, in the very first semester, they ended the medical illustration major at the Rochester Institute of Technology. And I remember sitting in the dorm, sort of shell-shocked and numb and thinking, now what do I do? Also so very independent that I didn't even ring my parents to say, Mommy, Daddy, we have a problem. I don't know what I'm supposed to do now. Do I leave university? Do I become a waitress? What do I do? I just realized I had to do something, of course, and I continued with the arts courses. And then a professor saw me one day in a studio, a sculpture studio, and he brought a stack of journals, put them in front of me and said, have a look. I think you'd be really good at this. And if you're interested, come see me. And the journals were on industrial design. And so it was that serendipitous, that much kismet, all Christmas magic. I was camped out at his office Monday morning, just hoping that I could become an industrial designer.
Incredible. When you chose to pursue that path, did it bring you more joy in terms of your studies and your view on life, as you had described earlier, whereby you can now integrate the design elements into your daily activities?
No, I don't think joy ever entered into the picture when I was in university. It was very frustrating. It was very much an uphill battle. There were very few women in industrial design, and my faculty were lovely, gentle men and very much feminists at heart. And they had neglected to tell me that it was a man's world, a man's field. I think with almost parental protection, that if they had scared me about the roadblocks I was going to encounter, maybe I wouldn't be brave enough to continue. If anything, being Irish, that just gets me feistier. So as I found it difficult, I realized that was absolute silliness and made no sense whatsoever, that half of the population would be excluded from a field of endeavor that had to do with the quality of everyday living, the production of the things, the tools we all use as consumers. So if anything, I was more enticed and more driven. And I exceeded expectations, I think, as a student and did very, very well and was hired to go to New York City by Raymond Loewy, who is a very famous Frenchman who became known as the father of American design. And I was hired by Mr. Loewy and worked in his New York office. At the time, he had an office in London, Paris, Chicago, and New York. And I remember sitting with Mr. Loewy feeling so anxious and eager, and it was like meeting the Pope or something. It was just a remarkable experience, and to think he was speaking with me and encouraging me and supporting me. That's where the joy came in, was realizing that he understood that a pathway had to be created for women as a gender in the field of design. And he had selected me to be one of those women leading the battle, which, of course, at the time I didn't realize I was, Joan of Arc. I was just living in the Mad Men era of quite chauvinistic and often cruel treatment of women. And then here we are today. I've just accepted last month the World Design Medal. So everything comes full circle, girls. Do not be afraid. As the Barbie movie taught us this summer, just take your place and keep working hard, and it all comes out well in the end, I think. That's the joy.
Indeed, and we can definitely come together in changing the world. And as you've mentioned, beyond the World Design Medal that you've received, you have received so many other awards and honors, from the 2020 Changemaker Award from the Center for Health and Design. ABC World News featured you as one of the 50 Americans defining the new millennium. And you also received the Design Mind Award from the National Design Award Center. And I was curious to know as to whether, among all these various accolades and recognitions that you have achieved, was there one specific that is more meaningful or that has been more impactful for you?
Well, this is where the gerontology enters in. And it was while working with Mr. Loewy that I realized there was a missing link in design philosophy, and it seemed to be humanism, such a basic component. I realized with the chauvinism of architecture and design that we also were seeing that individuals who were not considered primary consumers were being cast aside. And again, we were looking at a statistic of half of the planet, half of the population, because it was people of an age or people of an ability level that somehow design, and when I say design, it's with a capital D, which includes all of the creative venues and architecture and everyone. They had ignored those people as consumers. It was basically a world of two choices: the normal and the abnormal. That made no sense to me. And gratefully, because I was raised with my grandparents, I understood how important it was to have this kind of equity by design. And I saw the opportunity to make sure that all people could be made equal by design. And so I asked Mr. Loewy, could I go back to university? And I went to Columbia University and studied social gerontology, which is the social science of aging.
And this, I think, beautifully brings us into the aging experiment that you did over a couple of years, where you traveled by disguising yourself as an elderly person. And I absolutely find this remarkable. When I first read about your experiment, I was totally amazed by just the ingenuity behind it, because indeed, the 50% of the population, as you said, that has been left on the side and has been ignored in a lot of design elements is quite shocking when you truly stop and think about it. I was wondering if you could share more about the most surprising or eye-opening experiences during that specific experiment for you.
Well, again, because I was raised with my grandparents in my home, I saw as a little girl day-to-day challenges that they faced as their bodies didn't cooperate with the tasks of everyday living. I remember in particular one day when I was sitting with my grandmother in the kitchen, And I was always very precocious, and she was good at giving me silly tasks that kept me occupied, like putting the green beans in piles of 10, you know. And when you're 5 and you take on that duty, you know, I was so deliberate and diligent about it as she was going about making our family's supper. But I heard her make this horrible noise, a noise of pain, I came to understand, when she tried to open the refrigerator door, and her arthritis was so bad that day that it was like knives stabbing her fingers. And she walked out of the kitchen and went into her bedroom. And I ran for my mother, and my mother went in and talked to her. And then my mother came out and finished making the meal because my grandmother just was alone with her tears and her pain. Those sorts of memories really made me understand the link between design and looking at the needs of all people as equal. And certainly that inspired then one day when I met the makeup designer Barbara Kelly, who was working for Saturday Night Live and doing films and Broadway theater. We were at a party, and I innocently asked her if she could make me look 85. And she said, sure, because she's from Brooklyn, and she just thought it was another day at work for her. It was absolutely a tipping point for design, because as an elder, as you say, I was able to travel throughout North America for nearly 4 years and experience what it felt like to be viewed as an elder, but also to act as an elder, because I was wearing prosthetics that changed all my natural abilities then at the age of 26. And to experience inability and incapacity by design became the forefront for what became universal design and inclusive design, and an end, hopefully, to a day where we don't think of all people as equal and equitable by design. We're not quite there yet, but we're very close.
So, what have been some of the major evolutions that you have seen since that aging experiment in terms of universal design that you could share with our audience?
Well, I think we're seeing ageism being attacked very strongly. I just returned from the UK, and there are so many ad campaigns and companies and not for profit organizations working hard to end ageism in all things, but especially as attitudes. If someone is ageist, then when they go to work, no matter what their job, they're not going to be considerate of all ages. And so ageism really is at the core of our failure to see people as equal. By design, it means that engineers and architects and designers have to build a world and produce a world of products that support each and every person's needs for every day of their lives and give us all the lifestyle that we deserve and we dream about. And certainly that's the challenge. When I was in character, of course, we found so much minutia, just the tiniest little things, you know, like even trying to put a coin into the fare box on a bus back in the day when we were doing that. Was next to impossible. And I would often drop the coin because I was wearing splints on my fingers and they were numb, and I was wearing gloves. And so I didn't have the dexterity I had as a woman of 26. I was, in fact, a woman of 85. And how did the bus driver react? How did my fellow passengers react? You see this huge plethora of opportunities for people and for products and places to work together, this trilogy, this trinity of equity. It's just such an exciting thing now to look back on over 50 years of work and to see it all coming together, and to see, as I say, ageism being confronted as it should be, and hopefully one day eliminated.
And I know you have advised hundreds of firms to reverse their thinking on aging, including companies like AT&T and T and Procter and Gamble. And actually, Procter and Gamble introduced a campaign focused on ageless beauty. Can you tell us more a little bit about that?
I wish I could tell you in detail about various clients, but I can say this, that all of my clients that I've worked with in the Fortune 500 and specifically the Fortune 100 globally are companies that have a tremendous cultural concern for equity by design. And this is only growing. I've just returned from the UK and from Norway, where we're doing all sorts of work to make sure that we end homelessness, that we have the highest quality of life for all people by design. And it's absolutely thrilling. Design is no longer just about stuff or products or things. It's definitely about thinking, attitude, policy, programs, services. It's really broadened into all the cultural and social aspects and governance. I spend a great deal of time with governments, having also this past fall worked in Korea and Japan specifically, where there used to be such a high level of living for elders that has completely collapsed and devolved, which is frightening to see homeless people in Tokyo and their elders is heartbreaking. So we have still in the West people saying, oh, we should be like they are in Asia, the way they care for their elders. That's a myth now. That day is done, sadly. And all over the world, all of us at end of life could possibly be the victims of homelessness, poverty, and an inability to care for ourselves. That's not a governmental concern alone, and it's not a medical concern alone. It has to be part of this trilogy, and design is certainly at the head of the thinking.
As we look ahead, what trends or developments do you foresee in the coming years in the field of design and aging? And what do you hope to see in terms of societal attitudes and approaches to aging as it relates to creating a more joyful society?
I've been asking students of design and young practicing designers to put on their governance hat. I think until we have in our parliaments and our congresses, our state houses, governments of all types, designers and engineers, creatives, also as legislators, we will not achieve what we need to achieve. I'd like to make the point that here in the States, President Obama was able to finally get health care for all, which the richest country in the world shamefully did not provide and still doesn't provide completely. And one of the candidates for the election next year is already saying he plans to get rid of President Obama's law and reverse it, which makes no sense to me. That said, it didn't happen in our governance until we had doctors who were also in the Congress. So as physicians, they were able to edify their fellow Congress representatives and teach them the things that they didn't know. Healthcare being mandated by legislation is very risky business. As you also see in the United States now, women have lost domain over their bodies because primarily men in our legislatures are claiming that we don't know what we're doing or we don't have the rights to decide what we want to do with the quality of our own lives. I find all of this horrific and frightening, and I warn all women all over the world, my sisters by adoption, that they should be mindful of the travesties occurring here in the United States. And if the greatest country in the world can fall prey to this sort of mindless thinking, that you better be prepared for your own governments to do the same to you. So I say to all designers, be a mayor, be a president, be a prime minister, but take charge and lead with the head and the heart, and lead by design.
Dr. Moore, are there any personal stories or encounters from your career that stand out to you as particularly joyful in the context of designing for older adults or with the ageless uh, perspective, as you mentioned earlier?
Well, I think particularly in diagnostic health, I've done a lot of equipment design and diagnostic work. The creation of mobile mammography is one of my happiest and more joyous moments, to know that that work is saving the lives of women all over the world as mammography has become a norm. But more important, to bring mammography to villages and towns that didn't have a hospital so that every woman could access this early diagnostic and hopefully save her life. That's still every day when I wake up and I think about what I get to do, stands out as the thing I'm happiest about. And also the fact that as a woman, I had to fight the men who were funding the project to make it a process that was a little more comfortable with the automatic release feature of the compression of the breast during the x-ray. Men who didn't have breasts of that nature didn't understand why I was so adamant that we have the time and money to develop that. I was eager to tell them if they wanted a certain part of their body put under compression, I could show them what pain really feels like. And so we got to design the unit exactly as we needed to and wanted to. So every once in a while, there's some conversion involved. And as you can tell, I always tried to remember to be very Irish and wicked and fun and playful because I'm not leaving the room until I get a yes. I'm not very good at accepting a no.
I was curious to also get your views on the impact of the environment and how that relates to joy. So, do you believe that the environments that we inhabit have an impact on our sense of joy, especially as we age?
Most definitely. The planet is a living thing. It is a member of the family. If anything, it is the reason for the family. That we are, by design, destroying our planet is a painful recognition for me, again, daily. When I think of how will a product be recycled or not, is it going to become part of landfill? Will peoples in countries where children are sent in to sift through and find precious metals and be exposed to toxins that will end their little lives far too soon? All those variables are things I'm thinking about constantly and looking for how we can change laws and change our practices and the features of design to make for a world that is habitable, because right now we are on that precipice of wondering if we've not reached another tipping point where there is no return. Every living creature deserves good design, not just humans.
And beyond the sustainability realities and challenges that you've just highlighted, loneliness and isolation is also another key problem that we have in our societies, particularly as it relates to the aging population.
Well, it's sad to see how suicide has risen all over the world, how body dysmorphia, eating disorders, and this is affecting everyone from teens to grandparents. And just to know that we're suffering means something has gone awry. And there is also a fix. Wherever there's a problem, there's a solution. And this is where I'm always encouraging young designers, especially, to realize their career might not be about making things or stuff. You don't have to be Johnny Ive making a wonderful product for Apple. What if you made a policy that ended isolation and ended a fear of lack of security? Every time I read a little girl being attacked boarding a bus or walking alone on the street after school anywhere in the world, it's heartbreaking to me because I see that also as a failure of design. So there are so many issues that confront us. It's not just about making things, it's about making quality of life.
And as we envision a more joyful future and we look forward, what hopes and aspirations for creating a more joyful future for people of all ages do you foresee? And how can the design community contribute to this vision?
Well, it was interesting for me at the World Design Assembly in Tokyo. I decided to fold origami hearts. I'm sort of known for doing origami amongst my friends. And I'm notorious for handing a piece of origami seasonally to someone, even I'm passing on the street or in the market. And to see people's face just light up with joy over such a simple little thing, that I'm giving them this tiny little gift, which was my time folding this ancient practice of paper turning into something magical, and seeing their smile and just hearing them say, "This is really for me." It's as if we all become little children again, and you see them holding these precious little objects. Flight attendants put their heart on the wings of their uniform, or the little Santas that I was just folding coming home from London. And it just delights people. That's joy. And it's such a simple thing. It's like a smile to a stranger. As you say earlier, with the fear of isolation and loneliness in life, you don't know, the one person you smiled at this afternoon, you might have saved their life. It's literally that important. So I went to Tokyo, folded 400 little red hearts, and handed them out to as many of the attendees at the World Assembly as I could. And on our final day, the photographer had been noticing me giving people hearts, and she assembled all of us. And there's a wonderful photo. The World Design Organization is also in Montreal, so maybe I can hook you up and you can get this picture. And everyone's holding up their little origami heart. And if they didn't have one, they were making a heart with their fingers. And I just was so touched by that. It just brought me to tears to see how important that little artifact was to everybody, because it was a representation of love, of confidence, of design, and of the fact that we are one big family.
When did your passion for origami begin?
Oh, I think probably my first visit to Japan. I've been working in Japan since the 80s, and I was fascinated by it. I think I might have been in my hotel room, flipping the channel, trying to find something I could understand. And I saw origami, and then got to go shopping in the Ginza to these beautiful paper shops where you get the most gorgeous paper for origami. And I just started teaching myself. So I do all of the horoscopes. And next year, 2024, is the dragon. That's a very hard thing to fold, but I'll be folding dragons and handing those out to people. And again, as I say, I hand it out to people on the light rail, on the airplane, in the market, and they all stare at this little piece of paper in their hand, and they're just amazed. But in a word, they're full of joy.
And as you're handing these small origami pieces that you've just created, particularly in countries where you may not necessarily speak the language, I'm just curious, is there a universal language? I mean, for me, smiling, right, is the universal way of expressing our contentment. I'm just curious, in a country where maybe you have not spoken the language, has it been received in a negative way at all, or has it all been positive?
Oh, it's always, people are just amazed. And the sad thing is, it's the people who I think feel that they're not recognized as people. So the doorman at the hotel, or the chambermaid, or even the waiter at the restaurant for the breakfast, when I hand them a heart, even before I place an order or I walk through that door, suddenly they realize I'm seeing them as the human that they are, and giving them their due respect. So it's a great equalizer as well, because you're communicating, as you say, even if you don't know the language, the heart communicates beyond words. And that's why I always have them in my pocket. I see a little child crying in the shop, and I'll go over and hand the heart to the child, and suddenly the tears stop, and the parent looks at me with these eyes of thanks, and whatever that sad moment was, it's now been replaced with joy. And it's quite that easy. If we were just nice to one another, I know I'm a hopeless Pollyanna, maybe for some people, but I do believe in that very much so. I was asked recently at university how I want to be remembered. And no one had ever asked me that question. And I smiled, and I gave it a second of thought, and said, well, I hope people remember me as having been nice. And then all the students stood and started applauding. And I thought, see, that's really the key, isn't it? The key to the kingdom is just be nice. You don't have to be rich. You don't have to be powerful. You have to be kind. You have to be nice.
I fully agree. And Dr. Moore, if you could travel back in time and give your younger self one piece of advice, what would it be?
Never to worry. I mean, I also admit I'm a worrier. I see a situation, I worry about it, I stress over it. I think, what could I do? Oftentimes, my beloved sister, Colleen Margaret Mary, who really is the Irish one, she even plays the Celtic harp. She will turn to me when we're out traveling together or in public, and I'll see something, and she'll see what I see, and she will turn to me and say, "It's not your problem," because she knows how overwhelmed I can become worrying about something, trying to fix something. And she's the one oftentimes will take me by the arm and lead me away, even though I'm like, but maybe I can help. She's like, no, it's not your problem. and, and I'm not sure she's right, but she sometimes saves me from myself.
If you had a design superpower that could instantly solve one challenge in the world, what would it be and how would you use it?
I would wave a magic wand or sprinkle fairy dust that turned all nasty, mean, hateful, crude, rude, horrible people into nice people. I would take away their anger and their hate and their vitriol, and I would make them be nice. That's what I want to do. And there's the little girl speaking.
If you could collaborate with any historical figure, living or deceased, on a design project, who would it be and why?
Da Vinci. Because I'm sure Da Vinci was a Martian and he was brought to this planet to try and get us on the right track. And he left us with so much beautiful art, but also with remarkable design and engineering. You saw me smiling even as your question was forming, because I knew where it was going and I knew who I want to sit with and be with. In a way, I did work and live with Da Vinci, and that was Mr. Loewy, Raymond Loewy. If any of the people who are listening to our conversation don't know about him, please Google him and understand what a powerful force for good he was in the world. He designed everything from the Coca Cola bottle to Air Force One for President Kennedy, to the first space station, Skylab. And he was a humanist and a feminist and the most remarkable, gentle man. And so much of his good came from the fact that he was in the First World War. And one of the things he told me he would never do would be to design a weapon. And I agree with him in that. It's the only thing I've never done. I refuse to design weaponry or munitions of any kind, but I work with wounded warriors all over the world trying to rebuild their bodies and their lives by design.
How beautiful. And as we look at your life and all your accomplishments, can you share with us a personal mantra that guided you throughout your entire career and life?
Don't take no for an answer. My father had me by the hand in the butcher shop when I was maybe 3, and I was talking, big surprise, and chatting and saying, "Why does the butcher have the meat there? And why not do this?" And why, I was pointing things out in the case as we waited in the queue for our turn. And a lady standing behind my dad said, "Is she talking?" And my father was really amused by that. And he said, of course she's talking." And the woman proclaimed, "Well, she's a baby." But my father said, "Your mother and I realized when you were very little that there was something really special in you. You would look at a situation and most children would say, why? And you always said, why not?" So he said, "We knew that you had a past life where you had been a great leader or a warrior or something, and you just didn't take no for an answer. And you were always trying to fight for the right." And I'm rather proud of that, I must say.
And if there would be one recommendation you could make for the young designers out there that are envisioning a career in the field that you have pursued and you've accomplished so much, what would be one advice that you could share with those youngsters?
Think big. Take on the biggest issues of the day, things like the vitriol and hate, the separatism that comes because of not accepting all religions as equal, take on something like homelessness, take on gender inequity, take on war, take on the narcissistic, deranged leaders in the world today, tearing countries apart. Focus on them and how you will be their undoing by making them nice. And when I say that, of course, I don't mean just making them nice in terms of personality, but getting countries to stop assaulting other countries, other religions assaulting other religions, people assaulting other people. End it all. The polarity is tearing us apart. And we will, in fact, see the end of civilization as we know it if young designers today don't step up on stage and take over, take charge, lead by that kind of goodness. John Adams, one of the founders of the United States, once wrote to Thomas Jefferson, "There has never been a democracy that did not commit suicide." And I fear we're in that moment, but I'm also positive that by design, we can change everything for the good.
And what role do you believe AI plays in all this and in our future?
I see AI as a tool, as a helper. I don't see it as the bad guy in the movie. I know we've all seen those movies where the robots take over. I don't think that's the case. But I do think our legislators understand we didn't put in place rules and regulations for the internet and for the web and the digital realm that we're living in today. We regret that terribly because people say whatever they want to say. They hurt people, they destroy people. That should be illegal. It's very hard to manage that. So let's not make the same mistake with AI. And I applaud all the leaders of the technology working with governments to make sure that it's regulated properly so that we don't have the same issues that we have within the digital realm.
Dr. Moore, any final thoughts that you may wish to share with our audience as it relates to joy and your incredible life experiences?
Throw out your bucket list. Make sure every day you live your bucket list. Live in the moment. Don't worry about tomorrow. It's going to come. And just be happy. And if you exude joy, other people will find their joy as well.
Dr. Moore, it's been such a pleasure to have you with us today. Thank you so much for everything you have shared. And may the future continue to be amazingly bright and colorful for you. And really look forward to meeting you in person one day.
I hope so. Enjoy Noel, everyone, and be good because Santa's watching.